Today, I sit down with Lizzy Johnson. She is 22 years old. She is a new wife, a new mother, and she is a full time college student. She's wrapping up her degree at Liberty University. She is interning. She is doing all of the things. And today we get a bit tactical. We talk about what it's like getting married at 21 years old out in Washington state, not far from Seattle, and building your own community within a community where early marriage and parenthood is just not common anymore. Lizzie talks about what it's like supporting her husband through his career ambitions, developing her own. She's living genuinely. She's figuring things out one season at a time, and she's doing it all by placing her faith in God. You're going to want to stick around for this. Lizzie is lovely. She talks about writing and the importance of sharing testimony and about her life as a new wife and a new mother of a sweet baby girl. Join me today on Rebranding Motherhood. Lizzie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's nice to see you outside of staff meetings. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, right? I know. It's so nice to see you and get to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So you are very familiar with social media, with marketing. It's actually your college major, but I want to back up a bit before we get into your expertise and what your career looks like today. Tell us a bit about you and your history before you even came to a lot of these decisions about organizing motherhood and marriage around career and school and every ball you have in the air today as a 22-year-old.
Okay. Yeah, like you said, I'm 22 and a college student. I grew up in Washington State. I've lived here my whole life. I grew up in a Christian family, which has just grown me so much into who I am today. I give them so much credit for so much of who I am. My family is amazing. I was a cheerleader in high school, and also really just helped me get comfortable in being in front of people, talking with people, putting myself out there. We were really trained to be leaders more than just athletes. And so that really helped me put myself out into different spaces that I would not have been prepared to step out into otherwise, which is actually why I started volunteering with Loveline. So I put myself out there at an event that I went to. I saw a table that they had, and my now husband, actually, he's the one who really pushed me to do it. Well, I was talking to them, and they were like, "Oh, we don't have a TikTok yet." And he's like, "Well, she's great at TikTok. She does it all the time." That is how I kind of got my foot in the door with them, and then now interning and being on staff meetings with you. Being a Christian also really made my decision making for the colleges. So I decided to go to Liberty University after, actually, again, TikTok. It's always TikTok. I don't know. But I saw a TikTok of a girl who she was doing like a day in the life as a Liberty student. And I just was like, oh, that's where I want to go. So I decided to go there. And actually, I had originally went for social work. So I wanted to be a social worker. It was a huge passion of mine to work with kids in foster care. And then as I was there were so many reasons I decided not to continue there in person, at least. I still do their online school, but I decided not to continue in person for a few reasons, but a lot of it was just not knowing what I wanted to do because I was like, I don't really want to be a social worker. I want to work on the nonprofit volunteer side of that. And so I took a step back and I came home for a semester. And that was when I really started to think about things. Now husband and I, while I was at school, had decided to break up for a little while. We were doing long distance and it just was not exactly what we wanted it to be. And then when I came home, we were like, oh, we see each other everywhere because you're best friends with my brother and we have all the same friends. And so we decided, okay, let's talk, let's clear the air, let's have a discussion. And so we ended up working through everything. I love to point out the fact that we talked for 21 hours specifically about our relationship before getting back together. Not a spur of the moment decision at all. But eventually we did get back together. Now we're married. We have a little girl who's everything to us. But it was not necessarily in the plans to have kids this early. We had wanted to wait. Actually, the funny thing is, the day before I found out I was pregnant, I was at church and I was talking to one of my friends and she was, so how long after you get married do you want to have a baby? And I was like, I want to wait like 5 years. Like, I want so much time, just my husband and I, And the very next day, I found out I was pregnant. So, God has his plans. He laughs at ours. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I also write books. I did a podcast for a little while where I interviewed people just about their stories. I think that, well, in a class I took at Liberty, actually, I learned about how God knows that we relate mostly to stories and understand through stories, and that's why he gave us the Bible. And so that's also why we are supposed to share our testimonies. And so I really dove into that and was like, I want people to share their stories so we can get a better understanding of the world, understand how to properly communicate the gospel. And so that's why I was doing the podcast and also why I write the books that I do, because I want them to kind of feel like a testimony so that people can have a better understanding and perspective of the world and also get to have a better understanding of the gospel as well. I write books and that is my favorite thing to do. So,
How did you meet your husband?
we met at youth group. So the church I grew up in is very tiny and very old. We have mostly old people. And so I think the closest person in age to me at the time was my brother, who's 2 years younger than me. And we were like, we need something else. Like we need more people our age. So I had a couple friends who were going to a church that we actually used to go to, or I had at least gone to youth group at years and years beforehand. And this was my junior year of high school. And so I was like, I think I should go try it out again. So I did and ended up having a really great community there. I think I went almost a full year in the youth group before talking to my now husband. Like, we were in the same group, we just never, ever talked. And then that summer, I became friends with one of his best friends, and then we all kind of would hang out. So then him and I started to talk, and we went on a couple hikes together with some friends. And then I remember, this is such a funny little story, but I was driving because he's almost a full year younger than me, and he did not have his license at the time. So I was driving to the hike and he put his hand out for me to hold and I high-fived him and kept driving. And so later that day, then he held my hand again and we actually held hands. But I always love to share that story because it's hilarious. But yeah, so we started to talk and I was going to have my senior year and I knew I was going to Liberty. Like I knew I'm leaving. So I was like, he left after that hike. He left for 2 weeks on a camping trip where he'd had no service. And so I was like, it's going to go nowhere. I need to wrap my head around that now. Like I'm leaving. He's going, when he's on this trip, he's not going to think of me. And when he comes back, he's not going to want to be with me. And that's totally fine because I have to leave in a year anyway. And I don't want to do long distance. And then he came back and he asked me out. And I was like, okay. So we went out that whole year. Well, and then tried the long distance thing. It was hard for a lot of different reasons. And we just decided we needed space from each other. And so I broke up with him. It was a breakup. It was not supposed to be a break. And then 4 months later, we got back together. So, and then now we are very happily married.
There's something about the high five. It's fated for destiny because when my husband asked me out for the first time, we were at a restaurant and we're sitting across from each other. And I didn't what do you awkwardly lean in to kiss? So I high fived him. I high fived him. And it was really awkward because he stared at me for a second, yeah. Yeah, I'm psyched too. We're respecting our sixth kid and we're married almost 9 years. So it's, you know what? It
Still
worked for you. It
works.
worked for me. So
Right?
being slightly socially awkward to your advantage, because then they're
Right?
not weirded out when you become a weird mom,
That.
because that also
Yep.
happens,
Mm-hmm.
at least in my case.
Exactly.
So I love the beginning of that story. You have to admit, it's an anomaly these days. 22 was quite a normal age in my parents' generation. I'm a millennial. I'm 35. So my parents were married at 22, dated for 6 weeks. They're in their 70s, happily married. It's not so normal anymore. It is an anomaly, right? Because the average age for, I think it's first marriages in America is about 30.2 years old for men. We're looking at 28.6 years old for women. So you were 22 and he was 21 when you got married?
I was 21 and he was 20.
Okay, so even younger. You get to spend even more of your lives together. Your children get to see even more of you. Is that common in your community?
Say probably not in our region. No. In, like, our community that we've built, yes. Does that make sense? Like, at
Right.
church and a lot of our at least my friends, I would even say more of my community than his. A lot of his friends are not married, whereas a lot of mine are. Like, majority of my friends are.
Are your friends parents yet? We're looking at an average age for first-time mothers in the US being about 27.5 years old.
I have a few. So that was one thing when I got pregnant. I found out I was pregnant the day before I turned 21. Yeah. Which, yes, that was a
Fun
fun birthday
21st
present.
birthday.
Yeah, I knew one person who was pregnant. She's 35, I believe, and so this was her second kid. But her and I were friends, and so I hung out with her a lot, but it was still kinda hard because 'cause she'd been married for years. She is, like, 13 years older than me, and so there's a little not a huge disconnect, but a little bit there, and so I really wanted friends that were my age that were having kids, and I had no one. And then a few months into my pregnancy, I got a text from a girl who went to my old church. I helped plant a church in Seattle, but then when I got married, I moved back to my husband's church, which is so she was from the church in Seattle, but we weren't like super close when I was going there. And she reached out to me and she's like, "Hey, I heard from a few people that you were pregnant. I haven't told really anybody, but I'm also pregnant." And so her and I became really close in pregnancy. And then I think once I had my daughter, one girl and a guy from my husband's high school both announced that they were having kids. So I was like, oh, I'll have to reach out to them. And so I reached out to the girl and she was like, gosh, it's so nice to like have someone else. I know two other girls who are also pregnant. We should all hang out. And so we like created a little group chat. So there is five of us all together, five of us moms.
Army of babies from this group you've pulled together.
Yeah, it's really
Okay.
fun, and I honestly don't know what I would do without them because they have helped me just know, like, I'm not alone. I have other people my age, and then also it's just fun for us all to get together and the babies just kind of play and we talk. It's really fun.
It cannot be easy growing up you grew up in the Seattle area or
Mhm.
around Greater Washington State.
Yeah. Mhm.
That's not an easy community for what you are trying to accomplish. You mentioned that you and your husband live with your parents. So you have an intergenerational household, which I am a big fan of. That is what I grew up with both ways. My maternal grandmother lived with us. And then while my brother and sister in law were completing law school and medical school, we were kind of all hands on deck helping them through those experiences, even through a master's degree in there somewhere, just to be mean to us. No. And so we we had a blast, right? She coached my sports teams and I got to play with the baby while she was studying and it was great, right? I
Mhm.
absolutely loved it. It made me so unintimidated by motherhood watching the both of them carry this as newlyweds. And it, till this day, I am also a full-time student, a full-time working mom and expecting my sixth child. And I don't know anything different. I just don't. And so we model that for our kids. We're pretty proud of that actually in our family. My husband's looking at going to grad school himself and these things never happen at easy times, right? There
Mhm.
is no opportune time really to do anything in life because anything you do requires you to fight against gravity and to
Mhm.
fight against friction. We were not made to be frictionless. And so I think if we constantly compare the challenges ahead of us to whatever is the most frictionless option, we become paralyzed in our inaction. You guys have come up with many creative solutions because when do you graduate?
I graduate in August,
So
so
you are
so close.
so close to the end of this. But I'm sure getting married so young, starting your family right away has informed your decisions. You switched from social work primarily out of an understanding of where you wanted to position yourself in the nonprofit world and in serving others in this kind of intimate way, but you shifted to specifically to media and communications. Is there something about that area that appealed to you as a mother?
So I decided to switch a bit before I got pregnant, like a year-ish before. And I really did it because I was working or volunteering with Loveline. I realized I loved doing it. I loved making the content for my own books and podcasts too. And so I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to get a degree in it because I know I wanted to get some sort of degree. I know that there's a ton of stuff about like, should you go to college? Should you not go to college? And especially because at the end of the day, I did want to be a mom and I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And so at first there was a little bit of me was like, nope, not gonna finish it out. Like, I'm done. I'm gonna figure something else out. And then I got pushed by both my parents to continue going. And I'm really glad that I did. I like the idea that I have it. And because if I do become a stay-at-home mom eventually, you know, I would like to still be able to, if I need to, use the degree, especially because what my husband wants to go into, he's currently getting his CDL and then is going to go on to become a lineman, can be very dangerous.
Mhm.
And I like that I have a little bit of room that if something were to happen, I could go out and get a job with a degree. And then also, now doing it more, I love it. And so I think it would be just a really great opportunity because it can be a little more low key to do social media marketing, that I can still be home with my kids, but also work a little bit and do social media marketing. And so that's what's really been appealing to me now, doing it as a mom, getting the degree in it and doing the internship. Like, this is actually really, it's not necessarily an easy thing to do with kids, but it's a lot easier than having another job, like full-time job in person, and then having to like come home and have that, I don't know, that separation, if you will. Like,
Mhm.
you come home and you're a mom and then you leave for work and you're just at work. I like that I can work from home with my daughter here.
Work remote has been such a blessing
Mm.
to widen the capacity for mothers. And I will say something I read recently, I think it was from Dr. Arthur C. Brooks. So he's from Harvard. He's a contributor to the Free Press. He wrote something recently on you do not find your purpose, your purpose finds you. And I think as mothers, that is especially true for how we integrate the enterprise of motherhood and what we'd like to do with our careers. We make different calculations because we factor in where am I in position to my family at any given hour of the day, at any given season of life. How does that look? We make sure that it's all covered, right? Even if we are working in person, we make sure to our best efforts, that we have the resource to meet whatever need arises in the moment, because we see ourselves as the last line of defense. Even if we are managing the resource that can help us get our needs met and our family's needs met in that moment, whatever it looks like, we can get quite creative with those solutions. That is anywhere from food delivery services to some extra help after school programs, or like you and I working from home, where we are willing to work some interesting shifts around those babies. And I think too, sometimes even a selection of a position that might be a bit siloed. So a position that might not be so dependent on operational teamwork, that, if you're, say, editing an article at 10:30 at night, as long as you have it in by deadline, everyone's pretty happy. So that can be advantageous too, I think, as we're wanting to primarily be the caregiver at home. And we're also wanting to be able to work. And especially in, like you said, in your position, these are high risk professions. The one that your husband is going into, rewarding in so many ways, financially rewarding, it's good or honest labor, and you can provide for his family. But it is inevitably more dangerous, and it is very laborious. And so, just understanding the risks of injury and other inherent risks to those professions, and to be able to say, I've always got this. And I've
Mhm.
always got something that's going to predictably work well around parenthood. Again, in an intergenerational household. So have you always lived with your parents in marriage?
Yeah, in marriage, yes. He moved in about a week before we got married, and my mom said, "Yeah, you're not staying together," even though I was pregnant. Just I was pregnant already, and she goes, "Yeah, you're not staying in the same room till you're married." So he took what's now our room. I took my brother's at college right now, and so I took his room for the week. And then when we officially were married, then I moved back in. But yeah, so our
Understandably.
yes. And also, I have a 13-year-old sister, and
Mhm.
so well, she was 12 at the time, and so my mom was like, "N like, we are setting an example, we are that's
Right.
not happening." So, yeah,
Absolutely. So when did your love for writing start?
I've always loved writing.
Yeah.
Ever since I was little, I will say I think I attribute it to 2 teachers. I had my 1st grade teacher and my 3rd grade teacher made sure we wrote all the time. We had so many, fictional writing times. I remember one very specific. In 1st grade, we made wooden snowmen, and then you had to write a book about the wooden snowman, and she does it every year. So, my brother and I both had her, so we each have our little snowmen that, we get to keep. But we wrote a story for that, and then in 3rd grade, I remember we wrote another story, like, as a bigger project, and I got chosen to read it in front of all of the school staff. So there was a few people who were chosen to do that. And so I think that's really where it started. I just remember writing so many books when I was little. I was constantly writing stories and just loving it. And then I think during right before COVID, which I was a sophomore when COVID hit, I started to really dive into there's a website called Wattpad where you
Mhm.
could write stories and publish them. And I just remember writing as much on there as I possibly could, and found out that I didn't know that self-publishing was a thing until probably junior year of high school. And then I decided, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So I was like, before I graduate, I want to publish a book. And so I did. It is not available anymore because I should not have been allowed to do that yet. But I did publish. I ended up publishing 4 altogether that are now all taken down for right now. As much as I love them and they are like the characters are still my babies, they're definitely high school writing. You can tell it's not quite as good of writing. And so I did remove them all. And then I am currently just re-editing one because one of them I was in college when I published it and it's really good. But when I reread it, I realized there were quite a few edits my editor had missed. And I was like, okay, I want to take that down, go through it. And so that one will be back up in September. And then one of the other ones, I'm definitely going to rewrite it because it's still a favorite of mine. I had it next to me earlier, but it's not there anymore. But it's actually a pro-life book about a girl who gets pregnant in high school and she wants to have an abortion and her friend kind of talks her out of it. And anyway, I loved the story. I loved the plot and I still really want to get it out there, but the writing definitely needs improvement. So I'm going to rewrite it. But right now the plan is September. The one I'm just re-going through is coming out. In December, I have another one coming out, and then I'm currently writing 2 more. So, very excited.
It's amazing how early that love can start. I still remember stories that I wrote in 1st and 2nd grade and how that just never fizzled.
Right.
So that goes to show as a parent, give the kids their notebooks and give them those pens because you never know what's going to come from it. Early exposure to interests is so great, especially what we use our summer vacations for with our kids is all of the things that they might not have gotten to do during the school year. And that was something their principal really pushes on parents. She says, let us do the flashcards and the spelling words and all the fundamentals, right? And she's like, you guys read the good books to them, do the fun things, do the science experiments that are more suitable for home than a classroom of 25 kindergartners. And I love taking that advice, not only because my 7-year-old is convinced he can work with chemicals that I don't think undergrads at Stanford are yet allowed to work with, but he's very confident about that. But just things that are more suitable in a home environment, cooking, working with sharp utensils, mostly things that I'm glad we've already met our deductible for the year. I'm just going to let them do it, but it's fun, right? And one of those things during our summer break is book reports and journal writing. It's so fun, and we'll give them prompts, and then they really perform those stories. So, and I am a walking testimony that the girl who got weirdly excited about poetry contests will find a job in communications somehow. So it's good, right? It's good to be there for those things and to do them as parents, to pick up your laptop to write the story. But you are particularly interested in stories that are really testimonies. What pushed you into that niche?
Like I said earlier, I think a lot of it had to do with like knowing that like our testimonies are like personal ones are so important and how stories are how God uses or are what God uses to reach people. That plays a huge role in it. And I also just I want to write about the hard-hitting things. I wanna write about the things that people are actually going through and not just the lovey-dovey fun stories, which are great. They're amazing. I love reading them, but that's just not what I wanted to write. And honestly, I don't know how to write them. I don't know how to write a whole book that's just about someone solely falling in love. Like, that's just not me. You have to have depth to the characters. And I know, like, there are authors who do a great job at that. They add depth to the characters, and yet it's still a pretty fluffy story. But for me, I just can't, like, I can't get enough words on a page to do that. And so for me, it always had to have a lot more to it. And I also knew, like, okay, if I'm going to be writing books, they need to be ones that glorify God. And in high school is when I really like formed a relationship with God. It was not just like a surface level knowledge of him. And I was really getting back into reading at the time. And I was like, I want to read books that glorify God. I don't want to read books that are like worldly. And so I was like, let me write them. Because at the time, I didn't truly understand how many authors there were out there that you can find other places than Barnes and Noble, kind of a thing. Now I have a huge network of like amazing Christian authors that I wish I knew about their books in high school because I would have loved them. But at the time I didn't. And so I was like, let me write them. And so that's kind of where that started, was just writing books that glorified God. And then I was like, well, I want to write about this because this is like an issue that I see in our world. And I want to write about this because I know someone who went through that and how hard it was for them. And I want to show those people like how God is working in those situations. I'm not always the best at like evangelizing. I'm not very good at just talking to people. I'm very good at talking to people about God, but I'm not as good about like, oh, here's the gospel, let me share it with you. And so that's kind of where I feel like I get to do that, is through my writing, where here's the story and I get to share the gospel with the characters throughout the whole book. And in doing so, I'm sharing it with the reader. And so that's kind of where that started. And then, like I said, I just love writing about the hard hitting things. As I mentioned before, one of the books that I wrote was, it was to show like not common ground. It was to show understanding of both sides of the pro-life, pro-choice argument while still remaining pro-life. Like, I wanted people to understand why someone who's pro-choice might feel that way, but at the end of the day, abortion is wrong. And so, like, I wanted that pro-life value to shine through. The one that I'm currently editing, like, that one deals with substance abuse as a teenager. And so, like, that's kind of a hard-hitting one. I just finished writing and I'm going to publish it in December, one about a woman leaving a domestic violence marriage. And then, like, I have so many other books where you just diving into these hard topics because that's where God meets us. Like, God can meet us anywhere, and he does meet us anywhere. He meets people when they are at their highest, but a lot of times he's meeting people when they're at their very lowest and in very hard situations. And so I wanted to show that through my writing.
There's a way to digest these topics. Willfully ignoring them doesn't reach those who are most hurting. And yet we have this part of modern literature that aggrandizes really difficult topics. We saw this with the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon, where sexual abuse was so glorified. I haven't seen the new Wuthering Heights, but I can venture to guess that any director that puts what is supposed to be Margot Robbie's skin on the walls of her set isn't going for human dignity as a primary concern. So writing these stories, my husband very often will look into certain topics, horrifying ones that I say I don't have the stomach for, and yet, what I do for a living in the pro-life movement, a lot of people don't have the stomach for too, I suppose. But he will sit with these issues. He will sit with sometimes art from these eras or information, and I can't. Sometimes I will truly question him of why would you sit here and view this? How can you metabolize this as someone who really wants to see beauty in the world and really wants to aim up at God, but I guess he views it in the same way where why he reads books about totalitarian regimes. He's got to look at it. He's got to stare into the darkness and descend like Dante into the inferno. And not without a guide. Certainly he has advisors, but I respect that journey because I know what he's trying to wrestle from it ultimately is a reinforcement of his belief in God's sovereignty. And a man who's willing to reconcile that with some of the greatest suffering on earth and sometimes opening that drawer and opening up that content and seeing what's there. You have to respect him for it. It's not easy. Just like I know there are some stories about what I've heard at work or what we've dealt with in the pro life movement that would be entirely difficult for him to hear. We each have our topics, we each have our burdens that God has placed on our shoulders and given us a certain tolerance for, so that we can, like we said, descend a bit to ultimately kneel again before the throne and before sovereignty, knowing that we ourselves are not the saviors here and we ourselves are not sovereign over the solving of these complex issues. And I think sometimes that's what stories about testimony give us. It's not to aggrandize the hell, but it is to witness suffering, sin, brokenness, difficulty, sorrow, and yet compel ourselves not to despair because, as one of the great Jewish sages, Abraham Joshua Heschel, said, despair is not permitted. And as one of my favorite rabbis, Rabbi Daniel Lapin, says, he points very often to a command in the book of Deuteronomy that says, joy is a commandment. We are required to be joyful. And so I think there's something very powerful in writing books about testimony that deal with gripping issues for especially your generation and how they're dealing with them in a contemporary setting, but really books that affect us all, right? Some of these themes you're talking about, they're not unique to your generation. You're just writing for your generation's voice, which I think is incredibly powerful, especially with how the literacy rate in our country has plummeted. That seems to be a prevalent issue that isn't going away anytime soon because it seems to be embedded into a lot of our school systems. And so to reignite literacy, to reignite the testimony story, and to reignite hope is a beautiful way to share the gospel. And sometimes sharing the gospel on the nose, you're just not going to reach people that are adversarial to the very name of Jesus Christ. You
Yeah.
are going to, storytelling is the height of human communication. That's how we really connect with each other as we tell stories. And I
Mhm.
think there's something, especially what I hear and why you want to tell stories that can't be unrelated to your passion as a mother. Mothers often demonstrate our lessons in front of our children. We weave in meaning through everyday circumstances and sometimes extraordinary circumstances we are dealt with. And so to write about these occurrences in people's lives, even if they're fiction novels, that still writing about the human condition, and that's something very true and very embedded in the human heart. I'm very thrilled to hopefully soon read a lot of your novels and find a bit of myself in there, perhaps.
Thank you. Yeah, I it's my favorite thing, and I especially like putting it in like a romantic setting. So
Hmm.
most of my books, they are romance books. They always deal with, well, not always, because the one I am republishing is kind of that way, but it's not a real romance, if you will. It's like it's more fiction than just like an actual romance book. But almost all of the books that I write deal with two people falling in love, and in their journey of their relationship, they're helping each other see Christ and turn to Christ and deal with the traumas and deal with their past. And it's God reaching them. Sometimes, like, one character is Christian and the other isn't. And so it's God reaching the other character through the one that's Christian. I think I have a couple books where neither of them are. And so they are both being met by God in different places throughout their relationship. And then there are a couple that I've written where they're both Christian, but they're pointing each other to Christ and working through it together. So that's
Absolutely.
been really fun because, I mean, the gospel's a love letter to us from God. And so, marriage is a reflection of the gospel. So
Mhm.
why would that not be reflected in the books too? So that's probably one of my favorite parts about the books that I write.
Truly, love can be written about in so many different ways. Absolutely, I agree. Lizzie, thank you so much for sharing a bit about your journey in early marriage, how you are stepping into motherhood and you're still finding time to complete school, work, write your novels. It's incredible that you've chosen to have such a high capacity to fit so many of your goals and dreams into your life. And it is such a testimony itself that this is possible. And that you have used your time so well to include so many things that make up such a rich young life. And I'm so excited to see what this chapter brings you. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
On Rebranding Motherhood, we talk about the lie that motherhood is a trap, and that if you are in a situation where you need support, then no one will be there to help you or to be a steady voice for you. I want to talk to you about our Project Loveline that decimates that lie and helps women get real help in real time. We connect women with resources, or if we can't find one, we become the resource. So if you, someone you know, needs to access our hotline, you can visit us at loveline.com. And if you want to volunteer, if you want to be that steady voice in someone's life, we would love to talk to you about your heart for helping mothers. Thank you.